Okay, so in this video, we're going to have a quick look at the fetch, decode, execute cycle. Okay, so if you're watching this for the IB exam, it is called the machine instruction cycle. Okay, so let's have a look, and this will probably go more in depth than your exam needs you to know, but I'm not going to apologize for that because it is important. It's what your computer is basically doing all of the time. So let's have a look at what we have here. We have our main memory down here. That's where all of the instructions are stored. This is your RAM. We have our, excuse me, we have our registers. We have the memory address register, the control unit, the program counter, current instruction register, memory data register, the accumulator, the ALU. Okay, we have our interrupt signal there, and we have our buses, we have our data bus, our control bus, our address bus. And then finally, we do have our system clock. To remember, that is used to keep everything in time. Every pulse of the clock, one of these instructions happening. Remember, it's happening about 3 billion times a second, so that's 3 pulses of the system clock. Now, next thing to remember is this is very, very simplified version of the CPU. It doesn't really look like this in real life. It is way more complicated. And finally, we have our contents of the RAM here, which remember will be down here, but it's nice for instruction purposes to have it like a nice table so we can see where they are. So let's get started. So the first thing that's going to happen is, or what has already happened is, the program counter has loaded up the address of the first instruction to be carried out, which is, if you have a look here, is address 100. And then, so we have address in the program counter. Now the next thing that's going to happen is this address is going to be copied into the memory address register. So from the program counter, the address goes into the memory address register. Then what happens then is it travels down the address bus, and it finds this address inside of the main memory. And once it's found that address in the main memory, it finds the instruction that is inside of that address, and it uses the data bus to go up and places it inside of the MDR. So if you look at the instruction here, the instruction is load #1. Okay, so it's going to travel down, find address 100. Inside of address 100, it says load #1. So it's going to travel up the data bus and put LDA #1 in there. Okay, so you have the memory address register, uses the address bus, and then gets the data and places it into the memory address. So it uses the uses the address bus. Sorry, I'll write that again. Uses the address bus and puts it into the memory data register. Now, the very first thing that the computer will then do, or the CPU, is make a copy of it and put it into the current instruction register. That is important for later on. So we have the memory address register contents get put into the current instruction register contents. So this is the fetch. Okay, that's the fetch. Then what happens is the machine decodes it. Now, it doesn't really matter how it decodes it. That's very complex. If you need to know that, you can look it up on the internet, or I'll give you a book and you can read about it, but it does decode it. Okay? And it's decoded inside of the control unit. Does the decoding. Works out what this means. All right? Now, LDA is a instruction that just basically tells the machine to load whatever it is straight into the accumulator, which is in the arithmetic and logic unit. So this hash means number, so it's basically telling it to load up number 1. Okay, so now the accumulator has number 1. At this point, the CPU, the PC is going to load up to the next address, and then it will check to see if there's any interrupts. So has your printer run out of paper? Is your computer failing? Does another device need the CPU's attention? Something like that. Right, we're going to say it doesn't. There's no interrupts here, so we're going to go to the next one. So 101. So it goes into the memory address register, travels down the address bus, finds that address, and the data is, in 101, it says LDA 110. So this here turns to LDA 110. LDA 110. It will then make a copy in here, so LDA A110. Now you'll notice this one doesn't have a hash on. That means it's an address, so it will decode what it means, and it's saying load up this address. So at this point, the memory address register is going to find that address, and now that address is 110. 110. Now it's going to go down the address bus and find address 110, which is here. And you'll notice this doesn't have an instruction in it, just has a number in. So then that data is then taken up the data bus and put into the memory data register 150. Okay, so you can see now this instruction is gone. All right, this is why the CPU made a copy of it. All right, so now it knows that we've got 150 and it knows it's loading it. So we've got the data, the CPU is going to decode what it all means, and then it's going to put it into the accumulator, which is 150. Okay, now the next one, so